The heavy silence inside the grand strategy room felt suffocating as the glowing embers of the fireplace crackled softly. Ares stepped forward, his polished armor reflecting the dim light as he spat out words of cold rejection. He claimed that a mere warrior without an advanced combat blessing was holding the legendary hero back from greatness. Gideon did not offer a single word of protest, knowing that arguing with a prideful sage would be completely pointless. He quietly unclasped his heavy knightly emblem and placed it gently onto the polished wooden table. Turning his back on his former companions, he walked down the long, empty corridor toward absolute freedom. Weeks later, the crisp morning air of the frontier town called Zoltan greeted his face with refreshing warmth. He had officially shed his old identity, adopting the simple, unassuming name of Red. His ultimate goal was now to establish a small, quiet apothecary away from the chaotic horrors of war. To fund this peaceful dream, he spent his afternoons gathering basic medicinal plants in the nearby forest. He carefully identified a patch of common multi-heel grass growing near the damp roots of an ancient oak tree. Although his guide blessing lacked flashy high-tier magic, it provided him with unparalleled knowledge of everyday items. Carrying a heavy, overflowing wicker basket on his back, he made his way over to the local Adventurers Guild. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the familiar smell of spilled ale, roasted meat, and loud laughter. Red approached the wooden counter to trade his freshly gathered materials for cold hard copper coins. The friendly receptionist smiled warmly as she carefully counted out his modest daily earnings. With enough money finally saved up, he officially purchased the small, abandoned property at the edge of town. He spent 3 straight days scrubbing dust off the wooden floors and polishing the empty glass display jars. He carefully organized rows of porcelain mortar bowls and glass measuring flasks on the sturdy back shelves. The sweet earthy scent of dried leaves and crushed roots soon filled every single corner of the cozy room. He hung a beautifully carved wooden sign outside the front door that proudly read Red's Apothecary. On his very first official day, a young local boy cautiously walked inside while holding his swollen right arm. Red knelt down to his level, offering a comforting smile to immediately put the frightened child at ease. He carefully applied a soothing green paste made from his harvested herbs directly onto the red skin. Within mere seconds, the painful swelling visibly subsided, causing the young boy to gasp in pure delight. The boy thanked him profusely before running back out to play along the sun-drenched dirt streets. Red leaned against his shop counter, realizing that this simple happiness was exactly what he had always wanted. Word quickly spread through Zoltan about the highly effective and affordable medicine at the new shop. Over the next few days, a steady stream of elderly townsfolk and workers filled his store to purchase remedies. He worked diligently until dusk, carefully grinding dried ingredients inside his favorite stone mortar. As night fell over the borderlands, he poured himself a hot cup of herbal tea to unwind completely. He gazed out into the dark, starry night, briefly wondering how his sister, the true hero, was faring. He knew her heavy burden was immense, but he had been utterly powerless to remain by her side any longer. Shaking the melancholic thoughts from his mind, he resolved to firmly protect this newfound quiet slice of life. The following morning brought an unusual rush of energy into the shop as the front bell jingled loudly. A strikingly beautiful young woman with long flowing blonde hair stepped across the wooden threshold. Red's breath completely caught in his throat as he instantly recognized the legendary Princess Rit of Lagurvia. She locked eyes with him, a brilliantly radiant and relieved smile spreading across her beautiful face. She took a quick, purposeful step forward, her hand resting gracefully on the pommel of her sword. Before Red could even speak her name, a sudden, loud commotion erupted violently from the street right outside. Red instinctively dropped his mixing vial as the heavy wooden front door rattled violently against its iron hinges. Shouting voices echoed from the crowded cobblestone street, drawing the attention of every nearby townsperson. A massive runaway carriage pulled by 2 panicked armored horses was barreling recklessly down the narrow market alley. Children scattered frantically as the wooden wheels smashed through a vegetable vendor's fragile display stands. Suddenly, a flash of bright blonde hair cut through the chaotic dust cloud like a streak of pure gold. Princess Rit leaped high into the air, drawing her twin short swords with flawless, practiced precision. With a single swift strike of her blades, she severed the leather reins binding the terrified beasts to the heavy carriage. She landed gracefully on her feet, using her momentum to push the wooden carriage chassis safely into an empty alleyway. The surrounding crowd erupted into loud, breathless cheers at the magnificent display of martial skill. Rit sheathed her weapons cleanly, her sharp blue eyes scanning the crowd until they locked onto a specific shop sign. She instantly recognized the young man standing in the doorway and ran toward him with an uncontainable smile. Red could barely process the sight of the high-ranking princess standing right here in this remote borderland town. Without a single word of warning, Rit threw her arms around Red's neck, hugging him tightly in front of the onlookers. Red quickly pulled her inside the shop and shut the door to escape the gossiping whispers of his neighbors. The two sat down across from each other at a small wooden table covered in dried medicinal leaves. Rit explained that she had left her royal duties behind to find him, never forgetting how he saved her in the past war. Red listened quietly, remembering his old identity as Gideon, the Grand Knight who was brutally discarded by the hero's party. Breaking the heavy silence, Rit boldly declared that she would be living and working right here as his new partner. Red stuttered in absolute disbelief, pointing out the lack of space and her highly regal status. Rit simply laughed off his objections, unpacking her travel bag onto the shop's single counter. By the very next morning, the dynamic duo began completely reorganizing the dusty medicine shop from top to bottom. Rit used her extensive knowledge of rare plants to categorize the wild herbs Red had gathered from the nearby forest. Red carefully brewed a fresh batch of healing ointments, noticing how much faster the work went with her assistance. When the shop doors opened, the local townsfolk were immediately charmed by the beautiful new blonde assistant. Sales soared drastically within a few hours as customers lined up to buy the newly packaged remedies. During a quiet afternoon break, they shared a simple meal of freshly baked bread and hot herbal tea. Rit accidentally got flour on her nose, prompting Red to reach out and gently wipe it away for her. A sudden charged silence filled the small room as they realized just how close their faces actually were. Red cleared his throat loudly and stood up, trying to hide his rapidly beating heart behind a professional demeanor. Rit smiled softly to herself, deeply enjoying this simple, normal life far away from the pressures of royalty. As the sun began to set, the sky turned into a beautiful canopy of deep purple and brilliant orange hues. Red went outside to hang the closed sign on the door, taking a deep breath of the cool evening air. A local carpenter walked by, waving to Red and thanking him for the effective back pain ointment. Red smiled back, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment that he never once found on the brutal battlefields. Returning inside, he found that Rit had already swept the floors and lit the stone fireplace for the evening. She welcomed him back with a warm smile, making the rustic shop truly feel like a real home for the first time. They spent the rest of the night talking about new herbal recipes and planning for the future of their business. Far away from this peaceful haven, inside a dark and desolate volcanic castle, a sinister meeting was taking place. A high-ranking demon commander stared into a magical scrying orb, plotting his next devastating assault on humanity. The crystal ball flickered intensely, suddenly revealing a faint, golden magical signature originating from the quiet border town of Zoltan. The lingering golden glow of the crystal balls slowly faded, leaving the dark chamber of the hero's party filled with an uneasy silence. Ares slammed his fist onto the ornate table, his face contorting with growing impatience as the map before him rattled. Rudy stared blankly ahead, her expression completely devoid of human emotion due to the overwhelming compulsion of her hero blessing. The remaining party members exchanged tense glances, deeply feeling the critical absence of the guide who once held their logistics together. Ares insisted that they did not need a weakling who could not keep up with the scaling power of true frontline combatants. Yet deep within her locked consciousness, Rudy silently missed the warm presence of her older brother, Gideon. Hundreds of miles away in the frontier town of Zoltan, sunlight streamed warmly through the clean windows of the cozy Apothecary. Rit hummed a bright melody while carefully sweeping the smooth wooden floorboards near the front entrance. Red smiled gently as he organized a fresh batch of dried medicinal leaves into small, neat paper packets. The princess paused her work to lean across the counter, her bright eyes locking onto his with clear devotion. She noted that their daily business had steadily improved since they formally decided to manage the shop together. Red agreed that having a skilled companion made the complex daily operations much smoother than working alone. Suddenly, the peaceful atmosphere was shattered by the heavy, echoing sound of a nearby commotion out in the street. Rit tilted her head toward the front window, her sharp ears instantly picking up the aggressive shouting of angry voices. Red placed his measuring scale down carefully and walked toward the door to investigate the disturbance. Out in the dirt square, a group of boisterous, heavily armed adventurers was aggressively harassing a local merchant. The loud leader of the group wore flashy, unpolished plate armor and held a massive broadsword loosely over his broad shoulder. The elderly merchant cowered on the dusty ground, desperately clutching a spilled crate of simple trade goods to his chest. The aggressive warrior kicked a loose apple away, loudly demanding that the townspeople show proper respect to high-ranking mercenaries. Rit stepped out of the apothecary onto the wooden porch, her eyes narrowing as she instantly recognized their low-tier behavior. Red gently placed a hand on her shoulder, silently advising her to let him handle the situation without exposing her royal identity. He stepped down from the wooden porch with casual strides, completely unfazed by the menacing stance of the heavily armed men. Red greeted the rowdy adventurers with a pleasant smile, calmly asking if there was an issue that could be resolved through quiet conversation. The lead adventurer let out a booming laugh, looking down at Red's simple cloth tunic with utter contempt. He stepped closer, deliberately invading Red's personal space until the massive hilt of his broadsword was inches from Red's face. Red simply maintained his polite smile, his highly trained eyes instantly analyzing every single flaw in the warrior's aggressive posture. The aggressive warrior reached out with a heavy leather gauntlet, intending to violently shove the quiet shopkeeper out of his path. In a fraction of a second, Red subtly shifted his weight back, executing a flawless, minimal movement that caused the heavy hand to miss entirely. The brute stumbled forward from the sudden lack of resistance, his heavy armor clanking loudly as he desperately tried to regain his balance. Turning around with a crimson face, the leader drew his massive broadsword completely out of its sheath with a sharp steel ring. From the porch, Rit's hand instinctively flew down to the hidden hilt of her fine sword, her eyes flashing with dangerous intent. Red caught her movement from the corner of his eye and shook his head slightly, keeping his posture entirely relaxed. He looked directly into the angry eyes of the lead adventurer, his voice dropping to a low, incredibly steady tone that commanded instant attention. Red quietly pointed out that drawing weapons against unarmed citizens within town borders violated the explicit rules of the local adventurers guild. The brute froze mid-swing, the cold weight of Red's sudden invisible pressure making his battle instincts scream in unexpected terror. His companions looked around anxiously, suddenly realizing that the quiet townspeople were gathering and staring at them with intense hostility. Sheathing his broadsword with a rough slam, the lead adventurer spat on the dirt ground and ordered his men to pull back for now. The elderly merchant tearfully thanked Red as he carefully helped the old man stand up and collect his scattered wooden goods. Rit watched him walk back to the porch, her heart swelling with deep admiration for his ability to resolve conflict without unnecessary violence. Back inside the quiet shop, the two partners shared a gentle laugh as they finally returned to their peaceful routine of organizing herbs. However, far across the kingdom, a shadow loomed over a magical scrying table inside a massive dark fortress. A high-ranking demon commander stared intently at an ominous map, pinpointing the precise location of the frontier border town. The ancient parchment began to curdle and burn around the edges as an unnatural dark purple energy slowly leaked from the marker. He muttered that the legendary hero's hidden anchor would soon be completely destroyed, paving the way for the ultimate demonic invasion. Back in Zoltan, a sudden, chilling wind swept through the quiet streets, causing the wooden sign of Red's Apothecary to creak violently in the encroaching dark. The chilly wind howling through the dark streets of Zoltan rattled the windows of the quiet apothecary. Red tightened his grip on a wooden shelf as a sudden, unnatural surge of magical energy rippled through the distant town square. Upstairs, Princess Rit awoke with a start, her sharp elven ears twitching at the sound of distant, echoing screams. Red grabbed his trusty bronze sword from behind the counter and sprinted out into the cold, cobblestone streets. Rit followed closely behind him, her golden hair whipping wildly in the wind as they neared the center of the commotion. In the center of the town square, a young rookie adventurer knelt on the ground, screaming as a blazing crimson aura erupted from his body. The local townsfolk fled in panic as the boy's newly awakened hero blessing began to forcefully override his free will. Red recognized the terrifying symptoms immediately, knowing the absolute curse that an unguided high-ranking blessing could inflict upon a soul. An aggressive local adventurer from the previous day charged forward blindly, raising his massive axe to strike the unstable boy down. With blinding speed, Red intervened, parrying the massive axe with his simple bronze sword and throwing the brute backward. Red commanded the surrounding crowd to step back, his voice carrying the undeniable weight of a legendary commander. Rit stepped in front of the retreating crowd, drawing her rapier to ensure no one else interfered with Red's intervention. The young rookie, completely consumed by the raging blessing, lunged at Red with an unpredictable, savage strike. Red sidestepped the attack effortlessly, his movements fluid and precise from a lifetime of high-level combat experience. Instead of striking back with his blade, Red dropped his weapon entirely and stepped directly into the boy's dangerous aura. He placed a firm, reassuring hand on the boy's trembling shoulder, ignoring the searing magical heat burning his own skin. Red spoke in a low, steady voice, telling the boy that a blessing is merely a tool and does not define who he truly is. Hearing those words, the boy's frantic breathing began to slow, and the violent crimson aura started to flicker and recede. With one final deep breath, the boy collapsed forward into Red's arms, completely exhausted but finally free from the blessing's control. Rit watched from a distance, her heart swelling with profound admiration for the man who chose to save lives with kindness rather than power. The next morning, bright sunshine bathed the town of Zoltan in a warm golden light, erasing the terror of the previous night. Inside the apothecary, the young rookie adventurer sat by the counter, happily sipping a soothing herbal tea that Red had prepared. Red explained to him how to balance his daily life so that his hero blessing would never overwhelm his true self again. The young boy bowed deeply in gratitude before taking his leave, ready to live a life of true freedom on his own terms. As the door clicked shut, Red looked down at his hands, realizing that his true purpose wasn't fighting a demon lord, but protecting this fragile piece. Rit slipped into the room from the back kitchen, holding a basket of freshly picked sweet berries and humming a light tune. She popped a berry into her mouth and offered one to Red, her bright blue eyes twinkling with unconditional affection. Red accepted the berry, looking into her eyes as a profound sense of clarity washed over his entire being. He reached into his vest pocket, his fingers brushing against a small, velvet-wrapped object he had secretly purchased weeks ago. Rit noticed his sudden hesitation and tilted her head, her golden elven ears twitching slightly in amusement. Red took a deep breath, stepping out from behind the wooden counter to stand directly in front of the princess. He took both of her soft hands into his own, feeling the slight calluses from her own years as a proud warrior. He told her that his true happiness was here in Zoltan, running this tiny shop, and living every single day by her side. Rit's breath hitched as tears of pure, unadulterated joy began to well up in the corners of her eyes. Red pulled a small velvet cloth away, revealing a beautiful, simple silver ring adorned with a glowing green herb leaf motif. He asked her if she would do him the ultimate honor of marrying him and sharing this quiet, peaceful life forever. Without a single moment of hesitation, Rit threw her arms around his neck, crying tears of happiness as she shouted her enthusiastic consent. Red held her tightly against his chest, spinning her around slowly amid the fragrant scent of dried lavender and sweet magical flowers. He gently slid the silver ring onto her slender finger, sealing their promise of a quiet, beautiful future together. Outside the apothecary window, the peaceful town of Zoltan bustled with life, completely unaware that the world's strongest hero had found his true paradise.